Yay.
Meeting is being live streamed. Got it. Where's that?
Excellent.
So I think we're on. So let's just give folks another few seconds or whatever to wander up and get their tea, make themselves comfortable, settle the dogs, and we shall be away. So evening all, it's good to be back, and I'm very pleased to have somebody very special with me to talk to. She'll be a name that many people know, but for those who've not heard of Claire Martin, you need to get to know the name because she's got an awful lot to say about dogs. She's a wealth of information, and for me, a huge powerhouse in the dog world. Now, I met Claire nearly 10 years ago now, I think. She was a student going through our diploma, level 4 and level 5, and she was a smart cookie then. And I'm very pleased to find myself now sitting here learning loads and loads of stuff from her. So she's somebody who's really quite hard to categorize. You can often categorize people in the dog world as being trainers or interested in one particular breed or another, or following one particular path. Claire kind of does it all. And every path she follows has huge implications for the welfare of dogs and also the education of humans about dogs, and you know, ultimately to make people, sort of dog owners' lives much safer. So I'm not going to waffle on too much about, you know, giving introductions and that kind of stuff. I think it's much better that Claire introduce herself. And I think the way we launch into this, if we can, Claire, is for you to tell us a little bit about life in the Martin household.
Thanks, Robert. Well, life in the Martin household is unique, shall we say. I currently live with 9 rescue sighthound crosses. And my full-time job is that I'm a teacher in a specialist school working with young people with additional needs. I also run my own behaviour consultancy, and alongside that, I compete in several dog sports with my dogs, from agility through to canicross. Well, a whole range. We'll discuss those sports later as well.
That,
yeah, I'm a busy bee.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how you kind of organise that many dogs in your house, because I know they're all rescue, and I know they're dogs that have quite sticky pasts, some of them.
Yeah. So most of my dogs are pretty mellow. They're reasonably social. Not all of them though. So I've got a pretty average 3-bed semi in the suburbs, and my dogs mostly live wherever they want in the house. So they mooch around wherever's comfortable. They do what they want to do, yeah, they live a sort of a fairly, I suppose, well, for me, what I call a standard life. At night, they sleep, well, in sort of 2 separate groups. I have an upstairs group and a downstairs group. And they don't always exercise together because I've got quite a wide range of ages. So my oldest is nearly 13. My youngest is nearly 3. So they're quite different in their needs for exercise. But overall, we rub along pretty well. At times there have been difficulties. Not all of them get on all the time. And you've just had a little visit from my 3-year-old Malinois crossed with a Podenco. That was quite an interesting character. Yeah, you can't get involved, Base. That's lovely to see. I know. Go on, clear off.
He's wondering who you're talking to, I expect. So you've got Pondeccos. I know you've got some Heinz 57s. You've got an Irish bull.
I've got Irish bull lurcher. I've got a couple of collie lurchers. Yes. I've got a mixture of Spanish Podenco mixes and pure Podencos. And I've got a little Whippet Shepherd cross, who's my oldie at 13, who's a very special old lady. Yeah, so they all have different needs, and they vary from 6 kilos is the smallest to 34 kilos as the biggest. And they're all really fit dogs. So but they all have their very specific needs. And the way that we live together is most important for me to make sure that they're what we call it in COAPE, their hedonic budgets are met. Yeah. So we need to fulfill their behavioural needs as sighthounds for them to be emotionally and physically fulfilled, so that they can rub along with each other and be relaxed because they're getting what they need to.
Yeah, and I think one of the criticisms of people who keep lots of dogs is what you're doing is basically you've got a pie of so big, and what you're doing is dividing that hedonic budget pie up into 11 bits or 9 bits. So every
Yeah,
dog has a little bit less. But
yeah,
from talking to you and seeing what you do, what I see is each dog fulfilling a particular role within the household. You talk about the 13-year-old being a matriarch, kind of matriarchal figure.
absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about that, because I know it's one of these things which really gets people's hair standing up on the back of their neck, because they think we're going to start talking about dominance and all that sort of stuff. So tell me how that works.
So Nifa's my 13-year-old Whippet Shepherd Cross. She's a really special little dog. But she is very much the matriarch. So if any of the big boys are roughhousing and playing rudely, we have a rule in the lounge, which is that the lounge is for lounging. And if they're messing about, she'll stop them. She is quite capable of saying, "No, we don't do that." But she doesn't do it in an inappropriate way. And she will always come back to me for reassurance that she's getting it right. I've got, I say 9 dogs in total, 3 girls and 6 boys. And the 3 girls are absolutely a trio of emotional strength. And so, yeah, Nifa, the 13-year-old, she is the matriarch. I mean, people who perhaps didn't know otherwise might say that she was dominant, but she's not. She's just a naturally bossy dog. She likes things to run her way. I can't imagine where she gets it from. And the 2 other girls are very much her wingmen, I suppose you could say, or wing persons. And so they, if my little 6-kilo Podenco, so she's one of the girls, if she's feeling, if say one of the big dogs sort of almost stands on her, then Nifa, the 13-year-old, will, for want of a better word, tell off the one that's being rude. And it works really well. Nifa's sort of my deputy when I'm not there, but she's a gentle and she's just a lovely personality. And there are a lot of people I know who are watching this who will know that Nifa, when she's out and about, when she used to canicross, would absolutely behave like that in the real world as well, out with other dogs that she knows. She's got a huge extended dog family. She's got friends all the way across the country, and it's lovely to watch her meeting up with those friends and feeling comfortable with those friends, and straight away being respected. She's got some young, I sometimes call her a bit of a cougar. She likes young entire males, and will behave somewhat coquettishly with them. But they will never, ever push the boundaries, because she's just got one of those personalities. And that's what I really like about my dogs, is learning about their personalities and then fitting not only their physical needs for exercise and their needs as far as their breed type, but also their needs for their own fulfilling their hedonic budget as far as their personality type as well. And that's where it gets a little bit controversial as well, because people say, well, do dogs have personalities? And in my house, there's absolutely no doubt they do.
Yeah. Well, I think the interesting thing about your group is because you didn't necessarily choose them. I know you did for a couple of the younger ones, but they're ones that came probably through your behavior practice as reactive dogs that weren't coping well in their existing households, full of stress, perhaps bad experiences, learning bad habits to begin with. And yet you bring them into your house and they all find their place. And I think that's really interesting, because it's a wonderful experiment in how social animals actually learn to get on if they're allowed to do so. And what you'll get is this, I use the word hierarchy, but I don't mean hierarchy of bossiness. I mean hierarchy of personality types. Personalities shift, they're not fixed, which many people would be surprised by. They can shift and they can change to fit the particular group an animal is in. And I think with yours, what you see is basically dogs who are perhaps less confident, less experienced, feeding off the ones that are more experienced, like your 13-year-old matriarch, and kind of learning as they go along. And with any social group of animals, you will find that each finds their particular place of comfort. You find it with humans as well.
Yeah.
Usually it tends to go by age, doesn't it? You find the older siblings tend to be the ones that lead, if you like, the younger ones. And you find the same in any kind of household of dogs. And I think that's what plays well. Do you ever get any scraps and that kind of thing with them?
Yeah, sure. We have had occasionally scraps. A couple of the boys have had arguments, and it's been interesting because one thing I learned from my big bull lurcher, he's a bull Saluki cross, which is an interesting breeding. But yeah, he was one who desperately needed a home and needed a job to do. So he actually likes to, within the home, be quite independent. So he's generally chilling out in the kitchen. Now he's behind a kiddie gate, but he could jump over that. He could walk over that kiddie gate if he wanted at any time. He quite often is found snoozing on the work surface. So jumping over kiddie gate would be no problem at all. But he likes his personal space, and that kiddie gate just gives him a bit of privacy. Yet when we're out in a group running, or if he's canicrossing, he loves to be social, and he is absolutely adored by all the girls in my house, and he loves them. And Helix, who's a young Podenco cross, he would be I suppose I'd best describe him as he's the center of all play. He is an absolute joker. He takes nothing seriously. And Helix and Axis, my bull lurcher, together, they adore each other. Yet Axis chooses to have a little more privacy at home, whereas a group of my Podencos would choose to sleep in what I call a pod pile-up. So they literally are lying on top of each other. Whereas for him, that sort of personal intimacy would just be something he can't tolerate. And that's fine, and the major scrap he had was when another dog tried to lie too close to him, and he was like, nah, don't like this. But we haven't had a scrap for a long time, which is lovely, really. It helps it's just getting to know them as individuals.
And what about feeding? I think you're a raw feeder.
I am, broadly speaking, a raw feeder, although I do feed some kibble. So I feed most of them separately. So in my conservatory, I have a row of feeding shelves, which are actually 3 shelves tall. So if you imagine, some of the dogs are actually fed, I'm not very tall, above my head height, and they sort of bounce from shelf to shelf up to their little feeding place. And they all go to their places.
So it's a bit like cats.
Yeah,
my cats have all these levels.
Yeah, they've got little shelves, and they go to their feeding place, and they wait there till their whatever they're getting fed in is given to them. When Helix was very young, you see, he's not a gourmand, he's a gourmet. So he does like to enjoy his food. So there are actually a couple of the feeding places have got doors, and they're basically crate doors. And he likes to have a bit of privacy so that he can take all of his time. He likes to eat his food and enjoy every mouthful, whereas some of the others are a bit quicker. So they all go to their feeding place. When a group of them have finished, they clear off and go outside, and nobody's allowed to interfere with somebody else's feeding place. And that's really important, because that's actually teaching our dogs that they can trust each other, because nobody takes food is their such a primal resource. Whereas if I've got treats, they'll all gather around the treat pouch, literally, all those noses, nose to nose, and that's a very different sort of feeding environment. But your main meal, or meals, because I feed twice a day, are very much their own, and they have their own space. I think that's quite important.
Yeah. So when you've taken dogs in, how have you actually introduced perhaps a new rescue that you're bringing in to the current crowd, the family? Do you get any kind of problems with that, or have you encountered any obstacles?
It really depends on the dog, So the last dog I brought in was Base, and he came. I didn't really have much notice. I had about 24 hours notice, I think, before he came to me. And as always, Nifa is the one who meets them first, and they come into the house with Nifa. I do have my dogs are very social with other dogs. If at all possible, I will arrange for them to meet a dog outside of the home environment so they could get and play. But sometimes that's not possible. It really isn't. And so I set up an area maybe where they can be quiet with just a few of the other dogs. And I do have a sort of, I suppose I call them the welcoming team, which would be my uber social group who, as far as they're concerned, yay, we've got new friends coming to play. And I've had, sort of fostered or temporarily looked after quite a few friends' dogs who just come to stay for a while. And that's fine. They're kind of used to a dog arriving, and, because I still do foster occasionally. I haven't for a little while, but 9 isn't my maximum number. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. But I'm intrigued when you say they're all very sociable dogs, because I suspect they weren't all like that when they came to you originally. Because often dogs that have problems, particularly big dogs, are the dogs that you keep away from other dogs. It's usually dog problems that they're rehomed.
Yeah, and the key thing is giving them the chance to make really good decisions, giving them agency over their own lives, so they're able to make those choices. Because quite often a reactive dog is actually a dog that really hasn't got any choices about their life. And that can be really difficult for them. If you've got no choices and you're backed into a situation that you can't cope with, that's when you come out fighting. Whereas if you're given agency over this situation, so Axis was given the chance to actually have some space. That's my bull lurcher. And so he wouldn't meet a dog in his private space. Nobody goes into the kitchen but Axis. That's his private space. He chooses to go into there, and that's absolutely fine. He has the choice to come out, but nobody else goes in. That's his place. So giving dogs agency is so important.
Yeah, and I think you kind of raise a key point here, because people talk a lot about seeking. We're all talking about emotions and that kind of stuff now. But for me, most dogs spend most of their time seeking information. Information is the primary resource, to my mind, for dogs. And as owners of dogs, we tend to rather neglect that as one of their primary needs in this hedonic budget idea. We talk about seeking rewards and seeking pleasure and all that kind of stuff, but actually seeking information is absolutely key factor. And I think this is what you do with your dogs. What you're doing is giving the opportunity to seek information, not just from you, but from each other. And so information flows backwards and forwards through all these dogs, kind of through the ether. And this is very much part of what they do, and very much part of how you transfer your dogs. You said one of the things you said is all your dogs have jobs, and that's what we're going to go on to next. How you transfer that skill set that your dogs have developed into your work with the kids.
Yeah.
So let's go on to that.
So yes, I started. I met a lady who's now one of my colleagues. I met her through our dogs. She started off as a client of mine, and she said, "Oh, you really should come and teach our young people about living with dogs." And that kind of idea developed. It was a little seed that got planted, and it grew and it grew. And several years later, I now teach full-time in a school for young people with a variety of additional needs, but they are in many cases very able young people who have maybe some medical needs. Many are autistic, but they almost to one person, they adore dogs. And so myself and my colleague, we wrote a qualification, which is actually lodged with one of the exam boards, level 2 qualification in dog training and husbandry. And we teach that at post 16 level. And my dogs actually go into school with me, and on any day within the week, there will be at least one dog wandering around the classroom, in between classrooms, working with the young people, or just chilling with them in their own school environment.
So I don't want people going off with the wrong impression. This is a proper school where they're having proper lessons with English and maths and all that kind of stuff. And what you've done is integrated this dog training course in there as well. So the kids are learning that at the same time.
Yep, absolutely. So when they're doing their English, they're doing their maths, learning about computing. I also teach horticulture there. My proper job is I'm also a science teacher. So, I teach science, and I also teach dog training, because young people, our young people live with another species. Our adults, all of our, in the UK, hundreds of thousands, millions of young people live with another species in their home. And for me, it is really important that actually education is such a fundamental force within these young people's lives, and teaching our young people to understand that other species that living in their home and in their environment can both deepen the relationship, can also have huge educational benefits to that young person, where they can actually learn about their own emotions through learning about the emotions of dogs. And ultimately, my ambition is that it will contribute to a safer relationship between young people and dogs.
Which is what we will come to a little bit later when we talk about this DEFRA report, which incidentally I've posted in the feed on Facebook, folks, so you can pick that up and have a read, and have a cry over it, actually, because I think we probably will. Anyway, the kids you teach, there's a huge range, isn't it? There's from 2 to 3 years old right up to 19.
That's right, yeah. So the school covers
about that.
The whole age range. So primarily my dogs work with the post 16, so that's the 16 to 19 age range, but they also visit primary classrooms, and they are seen around school, and we do one-to-one dog therapy with some young people who have specific social emotional needs where they might benefit from some individual time with one of the dogs. So the dogs are absolutely part of our school. I'm very lucky. Our head teacher is hugely supportive. When you arrive at reception, you'll see a notice board, which has got the dogs' photos on. They have a school badge on their collar, which actually has the school logo, and they are very much a part of the school environment.
Now, just winding back a little bit, back to your home. You said that basically all your dogs consent to do what they do. So tell me a little bit about the consent when you choose, or when they choose, who's going to go to school.
Well, I'm going to use this morning as an example because, as we all know, today's been a fairly hot day, and it has been for the last few days. And so quite a few of the dogs are really keen to come into school today. But at the same time, although I do park my van, which is air conditioned, cooled, and is created in the school field in a shaded area where the dogs can relax, it was too hot to be leaving dogs in the van today. So I communicate with them and they communicate with me to decide who wants to come into school. So if in the morning my dogs have got their collars on and they will literally come to the gate, which is in front of my porch for a double method of safety, because I do live near a road, and they will ask to come to school. If they don't want to, they'll go and chill in the lounge, knowing that my dog walker will come and let them out at lunchtime, so they don't have to come to school. They choose, they make that choice.
And so basically, so it's not always the same dog each day. You'll find it's different dogs.
Yes, and sometimes I will have many dogs with me because they will do a rota, if maybe, depending on what classes I've got, as to whether they're all going to come. Maybe 5 or 6 will come if I've got a really dog heavy day where I've got lots of classes with the dogs, and we're going to go out into the fields or go and do some social dog walking as part of their work experience, but we'll come on to that in a bit. But today, Nifa, my 13-year-old, wanted to come to work, but it was too hot for her. So I took her collar off. She knows that when I've taken her collar off, that she's going to stay at home.
You sort of denied, you've basically said no to her ask.
So I removed her collar and I said no. Whereas Mercury Mercury chose to stay at home, and Sigma, who was stamping her paws, desperate to go, but she's a Spanish Podenco. She's a small dog. She is brilliant in the heat, and she was so excited. And when we got to school, she had full crazy zoomies on the field. And in fact, I posted that on my Facebook. I could even post the video on the Facebook feed down here, because there's nothing confidential about her at 7 o'clock in the morning doing crazy zoomies around the school field. She was absolutely delighted to be in school. It's quite cute, really.
So what do the dogs do then when the kids are doing their English and their maths and their science and stuff?
They sleep in the beds in the classroom sometimes, science, because science happens in a lab, they don't come into the labs, which is absolutely fair for health and safety things. We've got to protect them, but they will sleep in a classroom and do not much. If a student has what we call an emotional deregulation, so they're getting stressed about something, then often the dog will notice this before anybody else and will actually go over to the student and just pop their head on the student's lap and just be there. We've even had a couple of significant emotional deregulations. One young man I recall a couple of years back now, he was getting stressed about something, and he grabbed a chair and actually was quite aggressive, shaking the chair around. And Nifa and Darwin were in the room, two of my dogs, and they just went over to him and just sat with him. And they had, it was one of these things, you just stood there and watched, and they dealt with that situation better than any of us could have done, really. And the young man was able to just go, calm down. He stroked the dogs, and everything was fine. So yeah, they're incredibly intuitive, and they really are a real part of the learning environment. They really are.
And I think it's a good lesson to us all, because there's nothing there's nothing special about your dogs. It's basically because you've allowed their personalities to come through.
Yeah.
And I think the lesson for me is basically one of the things we talk a lot about in Andy's group, the dog-centered care, is this idea of always feeling we have to be training and controlling dogs, rather than just let their own sort of personality shine through. And I think your dog's a good example of the potential of probably what most dogs are actually capable of doing. Now, there's one instance which I think is really interesting, and that's when one of your students was doing her GCSEs.
Yeah, so a young lady, she was struggling, and she didn't want to go into the room where she was doing her GCSE exam. And she had the right, she has some social emotional needs, and she has the right to be in a room alone to do her GCSE with just a single invigilator, which is quite normal in our school. But she was outside, and she didn't want to go into the room at all. Luckily, the head of year gave me a call, and she just said, is a dog available, Claire? We could really do with this now, because we need to get this young person into the exam in time, because if she hadn't gone into the exam before a given time, she wouldn't have been able to do the exam, because it's quite important for her to be in that exam at a given time before another group came out. So we got about 20 minutes, and Mercury went into the exam with her and lay down, and did 40 minutes of the exam with her. Mercury got a bit bored because she was working at that point, and so the invigilator sent me a text via another member of staff, and I went and picked Mercury up. But without him, that young lady might not have actually done her GCSE English exam. And that's really important, because you can't get a job without a GCSE English exam. And Mercury, he just lay there, and she turned her chair around. And when I came in to pick Mercury up, this young lady had turned her chair around, so she was sort of sitting at an angle facing Mercury, and Mercury was sitting on a sofa in the room. We have some amazing one-to-one rooms which have little sofas in there. And so Mercury was lazing on the sofa with his head on the edge of the sofa, staring adoringly at this young person, and they were happy as anything. It was lovely. And that's really rewarding.
Yeah, and Mercury's
the collie lurcher, so he's 11-year-old. He was
I'm just trying to gauge his size.
He's 28 kilo,
Oh,
28
right,
kilo, three-quarter greyhound, quarter border collie.
Yeah, big boy.
Advertised in Facebook, incredibly terrified. I went to pick him up, and he was the biggest. I've never seen a dog so terrified. It took him 6 months before he could cope with me leaving the house without him. And now he's just the most together and assured dog. He's absolute a legend. The kids at school would never believe the state he was in when he first came to me. But yeah.
And I'm very interested in how kids in general, not just kids with special needs, but kids in general are tuned in to the emotionality of dogs. So tell me a little bit how that works, how you see the kind of dynamics.
Well, our young people,
with maybe grief and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It becomes apparent and said when one of your dogs died.
Yeah. So unfortunately, during lockdown number 2, Strike, one of my dogs, did sadly pass away, a Saluki, who was known very well to the students. They was their main dog in school. And so actually, the young people, in many cases, Strike was the first dog that many of them had, also the first, I suppose, person in their lives. I'm going to call it a person, because just to them, Strike was a person. So in the way they viewed him, it was their first loss. And so they were able to grieve his loss, but also a lot of them wanted to talk to the other dogs about how they felt. Just a minute. Somebody's a little bit, thank you. We're a little bit bored over here. It's been a bit difficult with the
it's been a long, hot day.
It's been a very long, hot day, and we're very, very happy. And somebody wants to give me a big sloppy kiss. So yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, they wanted to talk to particularly Mercury, actually, because they knew that Strike and Mercury were friends. And this was interesting because they wanted to know who was Strike's best friend, and how was Strike's best friend feeling about not having their best friend there.
And these are macho teenage boys.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Which you'd never see in a comprehensive.
Yeah. Some of them have.
You just wouldn't.
Some have, some haven't. Yep. Yeah. Some have, some haven't. But yeah, absolutely. These are, 6 foot tall boys who have spent most of today, with a 6 kilo Podenco on their laps, giving them kisses on their noses. Yeah, totally. And it's really good to be able to see them soften and show those emotions. It's lovely. It's really, really good. Yeah.
And what about PE? Because you say you've got dog training going in there as well. How do you integrate that? You've got your English, you've got your maths, you've got your science.
Yeah.
And then you've got your physical education, which most kids hate usually. Yeah,
and we don't specifically do dog training in PE, but I'll tell you what, when we're doing, because I do actually have dog training lessons with the students where they actually do our qualification. But if last year was a classic. There was a couple of young men who would do nothing in PE. They'd avoid doing anything. If I asked them to take one of my dogs for a run around the field, they would run around the field till their legs dropped off, because it was great fun. And they would race each other. They would love to go for a run around the field. And because the school is so friendly, I can even let my dogs off with the students, and they'll go and run about around the field. Over lockdown, I taught my dogs to do push-ups with me, so they would do a bow to stand transition. When I did a press up, it was for one of the lockdown trick challenges that I taught in my Facebook group. And the boys loved doing press ups with Darwin and Siri, and they would actually do press ups, and Siri and Darwin would do bow to stand transitions while they were doing press ups on the field. And it was great fun to watch, but try and get them to actually do any sort of organized PE, and they're like, no, it's not cool.
So do they do all that in synchrony?
Yeah. You do a press up when you go down into the press up position, and they go down into a bow, and then when you straighten your arms, they go back up to a stand. So it was a challenge that we set during lockdown to train in one of my online trick training classes. And Darwin and Siri will both do it obsessively. They're both addicted to bowing. And if the boys they get cheese for doing it as well. It's exciting. But yeah, absolutely.
Do as I do. Basically.
Totally. Right. They're like, this is great fun.
So press ups. What's all this press ups about? Tell us a little bit about your other side, which is basically your competition, your sports.
Okay, so my dogs and I, we do a number of dog sports. So started off with agility, which I still compete at, and I still train at. Siri is my main competing dog, and I'm training Helix and Base. Helix is the crazy fun boy, a little Podenco cross, and Base is my Malinois Podenco cross. So we compete at agility. Now, it's an interesting sport, agility, because it's a sport that requires really good handler and dog communication. And it gives dogs with herding drive a real job to do. 2 of my dogs who used to love doing agility are now retired. Nifa at 13 and Darwin at 10 and a half, nearly 11 now. So they've retired from competitive agility. Nifa when I first got her, she wasn't entirely comfortable with the presence of other dogs. She was even, you know, the matriarch of the family. She took some time to understand about the presence of other dogs, and agility gave her that ability to be able to focus and have a job, and to ignore other dogs around her that also had a job. Then I also compete at canicross, and this is a really interesting sport. So canicross, for those who don't know, is a sport of cross-country running with dogs. So the dog is wearing a harness. They've got a pulling harness specifically designed. Some people might call it a husky harness, but they certainly don't have to be huskies. Attached to a bungee rope that's attached to a hip belt that goes around the human. And we run and the dog pulls. And we do cross country. So the sport runs from September through till sort of April time, I suppose. And the muddier and wetter and colder, the better, really, for the sport. And it's a great sport for dogs that aren't too keen on other dogs in their faces, because everybody's traveling in the same direction. It's a race that starts usually staggered intervals of maybe 10 to 20, maybe 30 seconds. And we're all traveling the same direction. So you don't have to worry about a dog being rude and antagonizing another dog by getting in their face. We're all traveling. And really the only interaction dogs have is to ignore each other when they're passing. And that's a really great sport for dogs that are, I suppose, what we call reactive. But really, most reactive dogs are dogs that just don't appreciate another dog straight in their face. You know, why should?
Again, it comes down to seeking information.
Yeah.
Seeking information, not getting any information back, and then you end up with stress and conflict.
Yeah.
And again, I think consent comes into this as well. Consent from the dogs. You've got three different harnesses, haven't you? Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so there's my dogs have their pulling harness, their canicross harness, they have their walking harness, and a couple of them also have tracking harnesses as well. And then you've got dogs, they've got their working school collars and their home collars.
Yep.
So they've got quite a combination of equipment, and they understand what's going to happen with each different bit of equipment. They also each have their own specific toys for agility or for hoopers, which they understand all of these things, and they come to associate them with their different activities. Yeah. So if I get out my dog's racing harnesses, their pulling harnesses, if I did that now, the house, you wouldn't be able to hear me. The screaming and shouting would be absolutely off the planet, because canicross is really turning the seeking system into a really high energy activity, because we're all racing together. We're very much seeking that physical reward. And many of my dogs actually have, they will work for their toy, or they'll work for just the rolling around in a muddy bowl of water together, you know, or that happy feeling post-exercise, that serotonin rush after the you know, all of that exciting dopamine has been charging around our bodies as we race along. So showing, if you know, if I got my canicross harnesses out and a dog was reluctant to put it on, they're not going to go racing. They're telling me something. They're telling me that this isn't what they want to do, and that's absolutely fine. 100%. They don't have to do that. And in fact, with our canicross, the sport, there's no way I could force a dog to run. They're in front of us with a loose, flexible line. They don't have this. They absolutely have a choice at every turn. They are totally capable of making that choice. So usually,
so basically, just to set the scene, the dogs go with you to the event in the van.
Yep.
And then at the point that they're going to go off and prepare themselves for the race, they then make that choice as to whether they're going to participate or not. You obviously 100%. Have your kind of you obviously have your preferred dog, but if he says no or she says no, then you'll go to another one.
Yeah. And one of the difficulties things can be, though, is
they all want to do it.
Yes. and it's like when you go to the van and get a harness out, it's the pick me.
Yeah.
It's a bit like being a teacher again in a classroom. Yeah. You know, it's like asking for hands up. Mercury is known for being a little frustrated at times when it's not his chance to go racing. He's an older boy now, so he does the shorter races at the end of the day. Yes. And he sometimes has to be given something to have a good chew on, otherwise his bedding gets it if it's not his harness that comes out first. But yeah, and managing frustration is very important at that, because one of the things when you live as a group is you can't always have what you want when you want it. But what is really important is that you have what you want at some point. And that's so important.
And I think frustration is something that one of the things, or not learning to cope with it, is one of the things that causes many behavior problems, particularly in big dogs. Now, it's not just canicross that you do a whole host of things. You've got bikejor, scooterjor, hoopers, lure coursing, mantrailing. Tell us a little bit how that works, and how that works with the dynamics and skill sets of your dogs.
Sure. So as agility, I've already mentioned, it's Siri, Helix, and Base now. Those are my three. When my older dogs, Nifa and Darwin, were getting to the point where agility was too much for them, we actually swapped there to a sport called hoopers, which is a bit like agility, but without the jumping. So they're going through hoops on the ground. And then I got into that sport, and actually young dogs can do it too. And so I started doing that with some of my other young dogs who really enjoy that too. And I say it's a lot like agility, but there's quite a few extra skills, and the more you do of a lot of these things, the more technical it gets. So then you mentioned, I say canicross is running with the dogs. Scooterjor, I actually have, I suppose it's a bit like a big grown-up kid scooter. Literally, it's got two big wheels and no pedals, so it's got a foot plate that you actually stand on and you kick. And usually it's 2 dogs for scooter, because it's asking quite a lot. Base, if you go to bed. I know we're getting a little bit overexcited. Yes, we are. So so there's 2 dogs on that, and usually that's Base and Nifa. Let me just calm him down a second.
That's
Base. Right. Thank you. You go to bed. I know. Yes, I know. I know. I know. Good boy. I know. We're a very young dog, and we're just a little bit overexcited. Sorry about that. So anyway, scooter, 2 dogs on a scooter, and Base and Nebula, my young girl, do particularly well with that. And Nebula has learned from Nifa. And there we have an interesting situation where an older dog has actually taught a young dog her race skills. And one thing I didn't realize was how much Nifa had taught Nebula till I was on a start line once. And this was, and there's a start person there who gives the countdown, 3, 2, 1, go. And they were standing there doing the 3, 2, 1, go. And Nifa was always known for looking at the starter. She understood that 3, 2, 1, go. She understood what it meant. And she would actually listen herself, and on the go, even before I'd said the word go, she would then be head off and race. And Nebula, for her first race, was paired alongside Base. Nebula had raced with Nifa before, and as the starter said, are you ready, Claire? In 3, Nebula was literally turned straight at the starter and watched her, and it was like, whoa, there was my little Nifa in Nebula's body. And it was lovely, because she'd learnt not just from me, but she'd learnt from observing some of the other dogs. And dogs teaching dogs is an amazing experience to watch that happening.
Social learning, people say it doesn't
social
happen,
learning is hugely important. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So it's not all about this high level championship stuff, because you go right down to beginners, 4-year-olds, and some of your dogs have been running with tiny children.
Yeah, so I've got a friend, Kirsty and Tracy, with their 2 little 4-year-old twins. And they started their first season of racing just last Easter. And Nifa, my 13-year-old, and Nebula, 2 of my really reliable, sensible girls, raced along with 2 little 4-year-old twins. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. When the athletes, the human athletes, are that young, you have a human adult alongside, just to make sure that the dog can't pull the child over and that they get a good experience. But the young person is giving the dogs the verbal cues to turn left or right and do all that sort of thing. And it's absolutely wonderful to watch that happening. It really is. So yeah, and Nifa, she might be 13 and too old to race with me, but she's quite capable of doing a 300-meter race with a 4-year-old. And that fulfills Nifa, because it gives her a start and a finish really close to each other, so that she's able to really enjoy that. It's absolutely magic. Yeah.
And so this whole dog sports thing is something I know very little about, but basically there's something there for everybody, from the very young through to the old. And really importantly, it's something that certainly a vehicle that can be used to rehabilitate reactive dogs, which I think is something that you work with a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Makes a huge difference to reactive dogs. And we have a whole range of dogs who take part. And you know, there's all sorts of breeds of dog as well. Any dog that is fit enough to be able to travel with their human for about 5k, so 3 miles. So there are some breeds that perhaps wouldn't be capable of doing that. Things like the brackies, you know, so the bulldog breeds, not so good, or those with excessively long backs, where you wouldn't want them to be partaking. But there are other sports for those. Things like mantrailing, absolutely any dog can do, literally any dog.
Because it's not about the mileage, is it? It's just about chasing a scent.
It's absolutely about finding a lost person. And you know, my dogs absolutely love to find lost people. Great fun. And it's fulfilling those, you know, those dogs. It's seeking system. They're finding that person who has their toy or their food reward, and they're using it. And it's wonderful to watch people with a reactive dog that maybe hasn't been able to do as much as they perhaps wanted to, see what their dogs are capable of. And dog sports, it really builds the teamwork between people and their dogs, which is, you know, absolutely wonderful. Yeah.
Okay, so how did you actually get into the sports? Was it from your work as a behaviourist? Because that's kind of where we're going to go next.
Yeah, it wasn't particularly originally. I got more into it as a behaviourist, but I started off. I think I saw canicross on the TV a long time ago. And this was about sort of 2010, I reckon. So possibly 2008. Possibly. It's a long time for canicross. Agility is something I'd seen at Crufts for years and years and years. And it was something I wanted to do to get fit with my dog and go running with my dog. And that's kind of how it progressed. Yeah.
Right. So tell us, moving on to your behaviourist role, tell us a little bit about how that works, how you fit a behaviour practice into this, the kind of dogs you specialise in, the kind of skill sets that you use to rehabilitate some of these dogs.
Well, I've got, I suppose, two broad groups. I work with people with who have problems with dogs coping with other dogs, because I've got some very, very good dogs that act as what I call stooge dogs. And I also work with families who've got dogs who are struggling to deal with people sometimes. Right. So with the dogs that struggle with other dogs, it's helping families to understand why their dog's reactive and not necessarily change their dog, because actually not every human being is sociable, not every dog is sociable, but helping that family to understand their dog and to be able to help their dog to remove the stress and to help the dog to get the information from the situation that actually they're struggling to receive themselves. Because very often a dog that's reacting is being restrained and can't get the information it needs to get.
And it works both ways. You often, basically, the dog is giving out information in bucket loads, but the owners or the humans around it simply aren't acknowledging it or aren't seeing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do a lot of this either at weekends or in school holidays, which works quite well. And I also work with families who often have bought a dog for their children and then it hasn't worked out quite how they expected. And this is something that I'm really passionate about, is helping families with children to actually help their dogs to fit into their family life and help them to understand their dog. So it's often a dog that is seeking information and isn't getting the information it needs. So yeah, absolutely. But and working with families, as I often am, actually does work quite well in the school holidays. And then also my business, I do run sort of camps and workshops, which works quite well for me. So bringing a group of people together to introduce them to dog sports, to help them with their reactive dogs, to help to fulfill those dogs' hedonic budgets.
So you're kind of based in the middle of the country, aren't you? For anyone
Yep.
who wants to kind of get involved in the kinds of things you're doing. So
Yep.
Midlands area, that kind of area, right in the heart of Birmingham, that kind of place.
Absolutely, based in the Midlands area.
Right.
But yeah, but I do travel as well. Work all you know, it's quite busy. Yeah. I've got clients all the way around, and in fact I also work as the key behaviourist with a Podenco rescue as well. So I then have clients all over the country with them, helping with the challenges of living with a sighthound in a city flat or wherever else they happen to be.
And a lot of this you've been doing with Zoom, I suspect, over lockdown.
Yep, Zoom or Teams, Facebook Messenger. I'm getting, literally, I was a tech novice at the start of COVID, and now since then I ran, over the first lockdown, I ran an online trick class with clients in Texas and in Germany, all over the country. And it's amazing what we can do now remotely.
Yeah, I think we'll never go back. We'll never go back. No. Right. Okay. Your dogs save lives as well. And this is a controversial area because I know people are concerned about the idea of dogs consenting to give blood, but your dogs are blood donors as well. Tell us a little bit about how that works and how many lives you think your dogs have probably saved. Yeah.
Well, Tracer and Storm are two of my dog blood donors who are sadly, I suppose we describe them at the bridge now. They've passed away of wonderful old age. Axis and Mercury are actually now retired. So tragically, I don't have an active blood donor dog, but only just Axis is only just retired. Mercury was the 2021 Pet Blood Bank Bramble Craddock Award for lifetime service. My dogs absolutely consent to donate blood, and that's a really important thing. In the UK, Pet Blood Bank UK, the primary charity that arranges pet blood donation, dog blood donation, absolutely insists that their dogs donate willingly.
So they're actually trained to do this?
Yes, absolutely. So Mercury is trained to offer what a behaviour I call flat. So he will, he has to be picked up onto the table because he's frankly too lazy. And he lies down on the table, and then he's asked to lie down flat on his left-hand side, exposing his right-hand jugular. And he chooses that he's then, I suppose, gently, restrained is the wrong word. He's stroked and cuddled by a couple of nurses, because he is on a table 3 foot off the ground, and he's 28 kilos of dog. If he wiggled, the last thing they want is him to actually fall on his head. That would be terrible. And he absolutely donates with consent, with genuine consent. Face, just go around that way, lovely. Thank you, good boy. So yeah, he absolutely donates with full consent.
When you say consent, that's probably a good example would be, I think, your canicross.
That's Mercury, my canicross greyhound.
If she decides to give blood, she'll jump up on the table. If she doesn't want to,
that was Tracer. Yeah, absolutely. Hang on a sec, face. I know. All right.
I can see the slobber.
Oh, he's like, Mum, kiss me, cuddle me. I know. He's a bit of a cuddle monster. Yeah. So Tracer used to insist on jumping onto the table himself, which was great fun for him. And it was just what he insisted on doing. Mercury had to be picked up, but he then has a choice to lie down himself. And he absolutely, if he wanted to get up, even if he wanted to lift his head off the table, he would do. But he doesn't. He's just like happy to be stroked. They put a little bit of, the local anesthetic cream on his neck, pop the needle in when he's relaxed. They draw the blood. And then they have to usually wake him up afterwards, sort of like poke his nose and sort of give him a little kiss on the nose, say, Mercury, can we wake up, please?
Wake up.
And he'll go, what? And then we pick him back off the table, and he has his equivalent of a cup of tea and biscuit, which is a glass of water and a bowl of treats and a bit of dog food. And that's it. And off he goes. And he's absolutely has a choice to do this. There is no force applied whatsoever by Pet Blood. It's really important that this is an altruistic donation because we are absolutely performing a medical procedure which has, it's not benefiting Mercury directly.
No.
Okay. So he has to be prepared to make the choice that he will go through that procedure.
Yep.
For the reward has to be good enough, and and it's something that we have to choose. Is that for the benefit of dog kind, and is this being done appropriately,
Yep.
safely? And for me, it absolutely is. And it's there's a great story. It brought me to the best friendship ever through this. On the 25th of July, it will be 4 years ago or 4 years since I had an emergency phone call from a friend of mine saying, Claire, we need a blood donor and we need it urgently. There's an Italian Greyhound who's dying. The person I didn't know then, and I do know now, had taken her Italian Greyhound to the vets with hemolytic anemia. And Herbie, she wasn't expecting to take Herbie home. That's the reality. Mercury was a particularly special dog. He's a negative blood donor, and he's also been typed. He's got the lowest number of antigens at that time, pretty much of any donor dog they'd ever had. So we knew he was the equivalent of a universal donor. And we rushed to the vets in Leicester. Mercury dropped off his donation. The vets were blown away because it wasn't a pet blood bank donation, because Herbie had hemolytic anemia. He needed fresh blood, not blood that's been spun down by pet blood bank. He needed the platelets, which would be in fresh blood. Whereas in pet blood bank blood that's been preserved, obviously they will separate it into cells and plasma for better storage. But Herbie needed whole blood, and he needed it then and there.
So basically, behind every single milliliter of blood, there's another life. There's another story. It's not just blindly donating.
Herbie and Mercury. Well, Herbie's still alive now, and he's probably about 16, 17. He's a truly ancient little Italian Greyhound. And Herbie and Mercury adore each other. They're best friends.
Well, they're related now.
Friendship.
They're related now.
They are. We occasionally do the odd fun dog show as the Blood Brothers, and we've yet to come anything other than first, because when you tell somebody that story, they go, "Let just have the first rosette, nobody else." We're a bit of a ringer when it comes to pet dog shows with those two together.
We're getting close to time, Claire. So what I want to do is this DEFRA report that was published a couple of weeks ago, well, probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago now. No, actually less than that, 2 weeks ago. Of which there is a link on the Facebook feed for this talk. What are your views on that? I mean, I virtually wept when I read it.
So the big issue we have in the UK, as far as I'm concerned, is the weaponization of dogs and the resulting harm that some dogs can do to some children. And unfortunately, DEFRA have their own views on the problem, which is effectively the Dangerous Dogs Act and breed-specific legislation, which is making no difference whatsoever to the safety of young people, and is making only really a negative impact on the lives of dogs. It's and what we really need is education. Education right from the very beginning, cyclical embedded education that is taught in school. I mean, there are some great charities that go into school and do a quick visit, and they do some amazing work. But we need an understanding of the primary other species that we share our lives with within the education curriculum.
What you do in your school now needs to be rolled out into every single comprehensive school and private school around the country. That's what it needs, from primary school right the way through to secondary school.
We in schools we teach something called PSHCE, personal social health citizenship education. We teach our young people how to be safe with medication, how to understand the risks of smoking, of drugs, of alcohol. We don't teach them how to be safe with the other species that we live with. And
exactly.
Banning a few breeds of dog has absolutely no impact on the overall safety of our young people with Canis familiaris.
Okay, so people listening, there may be many people listening to this now, and many people who will listen to this in the future who may be interested in getting involved in what you're doing in their kind of area. So what can you say to them to help them find who to talk to? Maybe talk to you first.
Absolutely. I'd love people who are interested in helping to impact on the safety of the young people in their education environment. The great thing about the qualification we've written is that it is absolutely open to any school to use. We've given this to the country. We don't benefit from this. It's the absolutely, it's there for education, and I'm only too happy to talk to anybody in the education environment who wants to impact the safety of young people.
So we're talking about teachers, we're talking about parents of young children, maybe parents of older children.
Yeah,
anyone
absolutely.
interested in really trying to clear to help with this situation. Yeah,
anybody, and dog trainers and behaviourists who have a link with the school.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I forgot about them. So how would they contact you? Just through Facebook or?
Through Facebook. I can put some contact details below here. Absolutely. On the YouTube link. I've got no problem putting a contact detail. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, brilliant.
I can put an email address down easily.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think we're about to run out of time. I know you've got a chore to do. Claire, you've got to rush off and save a starling or something, haven't you?
A swift. I'm going to go off and do a transport run for a swift. That's right. Yeah.
So it's not just dogs.
But a homeless little swift that needs to be rescued. So my house is full of waifs and strays. Yeah,
the dogs don't eat the birds then.
They will be kept separate. They have different social emotional needs. Let's put it that way.
Claire, it was absolutely wonderful talking to you. I could have spent another hour at least doing this and still carry on and pick your brains more.
We'll meet up
let's
again.
keep our fingers crossed, and hopefully many people will be in touch with you to see if they can get involved with this. And thanks again, and I think we will call that a day. So you better
no problem.
Take the dogs out, and you too. All right, you take care now.
You too.
Thanks again.